Welcome back to another Q&A. The last one did really well, so let's keep these amazing questions coming. The most liked ones will be answered next time, or even be featured as a standalone topic. So don't be shy, and let's get started. Do you still believe in the 10 to 20 sets per week rule, or has that changed? I know a lot of the top guys are switching to as low as 4 to 8 sets per week. Thoughts? I no longer believe in the upper end of that range. For most lifters, staying in the bottom end is likely to drive the majority of your progress with the least amount of recovery problems. And I'll say this, if you can't get gains at the absolute minimum being 10 sets a week, then you don't know how to program. Because there is such a thing as a minimum effective dose, and we've already well exceeded it. So gains should have been guaranteed. Like you pointed out, there are now elite natural bodybuilders making great gains with just 8 sets a week or even less. So if you can't even make progress with something that's above that threshold, chances are you're doing a bunch of junk volume. And your intensity of effort is so low that this is why you need all these sets. See, back when I referenced the 10 to 20 sets rule, if you looked at my own training, I was never even close to 20 sets. Maybe for an occasional short-term block, but it was never sustainable. Yes, I had an intensity day and a volume day, but when you combine both of those days, your weekly net volume ends up somewhere in the middle. The maximum middle I claim is 12 to 15 sets. And even then, 15 is probably too much. For example, when I benched 405 for the first time, you'd think I'd be at the upper end of the volume range, but it was quite the opposite. I was only doing 3 max effort singles in addition to 3 sets of 10 at 70% every 72 hours. Which equates to about 7 hard sets of chest per week. There were no chest isolations. That's it. I was 1 set under the 8 sets per week zone, and it got me to the pinnacle of benching status. Then I repeated the same thing a few months ago. Same classic template, but with the addition of 1 set of the chest crusher, which brought me to 8 total sets for chest. Plus was every 5 days as opposed to every 72 hours. So the weekly volume was technically lower or about the same. And guess what? I got even stronger than last time with less wear and tear. I only took 1 deload. Typically, I don't advise higher than 4 to 6 sets of muscle per workout, depending on how many exercises are done. It reminds me of those old German volume studies, where doing more than 5 sets of 10 in a workout showed vastly diminishing returns. Funny how that turned out to be correct in a bodybuilding application when spread across multiple exercises. So the goal is to use the lowest volume you can recover from in time and still make progress, not the highest volume you can barely tolerate. Muscle damage lingers, and piling on more sets just deepens the recovery hole. You want the minimal amount of sets that maximize progressive overload, and that is your feedback. Progression is evidence that your training is working, not the driver. You don't have to artificially force progression by ramping up endless volume. If you're not getting stronger, you're not actually recovering, and doing more won't be better. Likewise, if you're getting stronger at a normal rate, with low volume, then the stimulus and adaptations are taking place. So just add +1s over time when you can. Also, I don't count half sets. That's how you end up with a spider physique. Now let's say you're doing incline bench, flat bench, and weighted dips, plus a chest crusher and fly. That could push you up to the upper range, but it still might be too much. Most lifters just need 1 horizontal push and 1 vertical push, 2 sets each, plus a fly. That's 5 or 6 sets tops. Same for the arms. 2 exercises each for biceps, like incline curls and preacher curls. And for triceps, like push downs and overhead extensions, done twice a week. That's only 8 sets. And for quads, 2 sets each of Hatfield squats, belt squats, and sissy squats. That's 6 sets. For posterior chain, good morning, Nordic curl, and reverse hypers, again, 6 sets. In total, we have 12 sets for legs, and I only do this just once a week. So at most, it's 12 sets weekly, but not for all muscles. Now, isolations hover around 8 sets. So 8 to 12 weekly sets is realistically where you want to be, not 15 to 20 sets. And if you actually train hard at 0 to 1 reps in reserve, you won't be able to handle that much volume. You won't recover from it. Even doing this with heavy weight twice a week is enough to leave you borderline recovered, if that. That's why some lifters drop even lower into the 4 to 8 set range to increase frequency. The logic is this: do fewer sets per workout, just hit the bare minimum and go to gym 3 times a week instead of once or twice. Or go twice a week but feel fresher and still make gains. After all, the first sets are the most effective, and each additional one provides less stimulus while adding disproportionately more fatigue. So more frequent exposure to those initial high quality sets gives you a higher quality weekly workload. Therefore, when this kind of volume is equated across the week, frequency actually does matter from a mechanistic perspective. Now, outcome studies might show no difference between splits and full body, but those full body programs often use too much volume to recover from, and that's the criticism. So if you run lower volume with higher frequency, even if total sets are fewer, technically those sets tend to be more hypertrophic and you'll get better gains with less volume. So you don't even need moderate volume, you can stay on the lower end. That's the mindset. And it does make sense. So I'd argue most lifters are doing too many sets and not recovering from them. I won't do 20 sets a week, and I care about maximizing my natural potential more than anyone. I'm not leaving gains on the table. I just can't recover from that insane level of volume. I don't see faster progress and my joints feel worse. So it's overrated, especially in evidence-based circles. And those who promote those absurdly high volume studies, how come they don't train that way? Even the most dedicated naturals avoid it. What does that tell you? Maybe pushing ultra high volumes was never the solution or the main driver of hypertrophy like we once thought. Why is it that most of the time you do a variation for a lift instead of the actual lift? Wouldn't it be better to do the lift you're training for? What are you referring to? Training for strength with the max effort method or using variations in a bodybuilding sense? Because in the case of max effort, that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. I covered this in my maxing out exposed video, but if you repeat the same lift every week, after around 3 weeks, you'll start to move backwards in strength. You won't hit PRs consistently. In fact, if you're advanced, you might not even make it to week 2. I certainly wouldn't. Either you stall or get stable, and then your joints start to suffer. That's how maxing out got a bad reputation. It's not inherently dangerous, it's that lifters use it recklessly. You got bros maxing out on the same barbell bench press every week, going nowhere, then concluding that maxing out is just testing strength. Such a lie. That's not building it. Guys, you're training the ability to strain and recruiting the high threshold motor units immediately under slow bar speeds. The only way to do that long term, which Westside Barbell figured out decades ago, is by rotating exercises. That's non-negotiable. You have to do it. It is 100% mandatory. You cannot run conjugate without changing the variations. You can't. It's impossible. So that's how I maxed out weekly for years with 0 injuries, while many lifters younger than me are already banged up. Exercise rotation is why. I'm not indestructible. I'm not made out of titanium. I don't have these super elite bulletproofing genetics. It's smart programming. And I value exercise rotation even more than progressive overload itself. And just rotating lifts reduces repetitive joint stress. When you rotate, you naturally get different loading exposures. It only becomes problematic if you're constantly doing extreme overloads, but most of the variations we do are harder, so you're lifting less by default. Now to your second point, why not just stick to the basics in a hypertrophy context? Because I want to optimize the stimulus to fatigue ratio. I don't want to lift heavier than what is required. I want the movement to be harder in the right way so I can recover like a less experienced lifter. Absolute load is a real recovery problem. That's why I do Larson presses, no leg drive, all upper body. It's also why I stopped arching. I'm done compressing my ribcage. If you flex your abs and tuck in, you get more arm bend, a better scapulohumeral rhythm with improved protraction, and greater chest activation. Yes, you'll lift less, but who cares? The quality of the movement is superior. And if range of motion becomes excessive, you can add a block. that gives you similar ROM to your old arched setup, but with improved mechanics. So I want to lift the least weight possible while making the exercise as effective as possible. Same goes for pull-ups. I use a super wide grip, so I don't need more than 2 plates. With my best grip, I could do 150 pounds for reps. It's always over 3 plates per session. And I can pull 4 plates for 1 rep max across all the grips. So even my light days, if I'm going by percentages, are heavy by default. So making the movement harder lets me reduce the absolute load. And sometimes it's not about being harder, it's about fixing muscular weaknesses. So I use chains on my bench press because I struggle with lockout strength. Without accommodating resistance, I start stalling again at the top. I explode off the chest but fail in the last quarter arm bend, literally the complete end. Sure, I keep doing the regular close grip bench, but modifying it fixes my issue. In the end, that makes me stronger at the regular close grip bench, which I've proven many times with my 381 rep max and 3 sets of 10 with 290. This isn't theory, I've documented it for a decade. Strength carries over. Strength is strength. Of course, it is a conjugate thought process, but it's grounded in logic and results. I'm all about longevity, balance, and evolving the basics with smart adjustments. Now, I still love the fundamentals, but I believe in upgrading them. That's what I show in my training, and the results speak for themselves. For many of you, this will keep you mentally fresh while making your journey more productive and far more sustainable, with a much lower risk of injury. What's the difference between 2 and 3 unique days in a full body workout system, ABA, BAB versus ABC, ABC? Muscle and strength differences at various levels. Just like the previous question, this deals with overuse injuries. If you have a variety of training days, your joints will hurt a lot less because there's less exercise redundancy, more opportunity for muscle biasing, and more flexibility in how you distribute volume. You can do volume day and intensity day, or in the case of ABC, it could be heavy, light, medium. This makes load management far more doable, especially with 3 times a week full body, where you might not be 100% recovered every session. So with that limitation, you have to make adjustments in both exercise selection and volume. Maybe on A day, you could do more length and bias work. On B day, you go less stretch intensive, or normal range of motion or partials for less muscle damage. Then on C day, you come in with more mid-range work, or revisit length and bias training with heavier loads or higher volume. It's just basic fatigue management. And when you rotate exercises, you don't have to worry as much about forcing progressive overload. So if you do the same full body workout every session, you're under pressure, because with only 48 hours of recovery, you're expected to hit a +1 on the lifts that you just did, which is unlikely. But if you rotate that variation, address your weaknesses, or simply give yourself more rest before repeating that movement, you're likely to experience better progressive overload, more predictable. So you can't speed up results by repeating the same lifts non-stop. So you might as well progress multiple variations at once and raise them at a steady, reasonable rate. Now, in terms of which split I use, I recommend the ABA-BAB setup over ABC, just because there's fewer exercises to worry about. ABC is more complicated since it requires more total movement selection. ABA is asynchronous. You know what to expect, and you can run 2 solid full body workouts and milk them for as long as possible. You don't have to follow a strict heavy, light, medium model. It can be volume day intensity, alternating back and forth, or even just volume only or intensity only. There's less complexity and periodization. So for most people, ABA, BAB is probably best, just like you see in my Novice program. On the other hand, if you are more experienced, while having done full body workout for a while, and you understand periodization, then feel free to try ABC. I've done that as well, but I never stuck with it long term. I've always preferred 2 good full body workouts, whether that's 3 days a week or twice a week. Should beginners focus on leg drive for the bench press? If you plan on competing in powerlifting, then yes, you probably should. In general, I don't think it's a bad idea to learn leg drive early on, not because you're trying to get a massive boost, but because it teaches you how to stay tight and stable. It locks you into position. See, a lot of beginners dance their legs around, hop their knees, or raise their butt off the bench when the weight gets heavy, or they get closer to failure. The leg drive eliminates all that. It puts you into place so that nothing moves. There's less lateral shifting, and you stay in control of the weight. I think it's a great cue to master early on. And it's not just about the legs, it also helps lock in your upper back tightness, which helps if you're going to bench press with an arch. But even if you're not pressing with your legs, you can at least set them properly and not move them. Alternatively, you can go straight into the Larson press style, but that's usually not my recommendation for beginners because it demands more coordination. So if you can't bench at least 185, you'll likely be unstable because you're still learning how to bench and you need a bit of base strength before jumping into a more advanced variation. That said, if using a Smith machine, I don't see a problem with kicking your legs out in front. It really won't make a difference. And I actually do believe it's a superior chest exercise. Personally, I don't put my feet down anymore. I bench exclusively with the Larson press. And if I can go back in time, I probably would have done so the moment I hit a 225 bench because it reinforces proper ribcage mechanics. I didn't arch back when I used to do calisthenics, a lot of push-ups and dips. And that's one thing about calisthenics. If you come from that world, your bench form may look very different than what some powerlifters are taught. Since you're not all puffed out and have a good scapulohumeral rhythm from day one, you know how to protract well and not contort your body. Is close grip bench a better chest exercise than moderate grip? I'm 6'2" with long arms and my wrists aren't stacked. Should I go wider even if it's less comfortable? The argument for close grip bench being better is that when your elbows are tucked, you get more shoulder flexion, which better activates the upper chest. It's also easier on the shoulders, so you can train harder and possibly do more volume. In general, you'll be able to bench long term without pain. That's why I bench exclusively with a closer grip. Either shoulder width apart or thumb away from the smooths. Wide is not the default for me since it's generally harder on the shoulders, even if you can adapt, and I'm doing more of it nowadays. So you also get more arm bend from a close grip, which technically increases the pec stretch. You want your elbows well below 90 degrees at the bottom, pointing straight down, and a narrower grip guarantees that. There's also an argument for leveraging the rib cage. You're working in a 3D space, and when the arms are tucked, that can technically stretch the pecs more internally than a wide, flared arm path, even if wide grip feels more intense locally. So the pecs and lats are very similar in this regard. A frontal plane pull and a sagittal plane pull both train the lats, but the tuck version leverages the rib cage. It's like wrapping a rope around a barrel. You're not pulling in a straight line, using the curvature to drive in from origin to insertion. That same concept applies to the close grip bench. With a tucked arm path, you're not following the fibers directly, but you're wrapping around the stretch. Whereas with a wide grip, you're working more in pure humeral adduction with less shoulder flexion, but now you're directly aligned with the chest fibers. I hope that makes sense, but you gotta look at it in a 3D context, so this can be a bit wordy to explain. It becomes a question of which model you follow. Direct fiber alignment with a wide grip or internal leverages with a close grip. I don't think there's a massive difference, and anecdotally, a lot of the old school bodybuilders said the complete opposite. That wide builds an armor-plated chest look. So what I think you should base it on is your sticking points, shoulder health, and whether your triceps are feeling before your chest. So both styles will build watermelon pecs in the long run. Just that if one isn't working, try the opposite. Just use what fits your mechanics best. And if you have long arms and prefer close grip, but the bottom range of motion is too much, a board press can solve that. Because even me with shorter arms, I get a nice arm bend. Hey Alex, am I leaving gains in the table if I arch and use more chest on OHB? I have a big rib cage, so it feels natural, but does it still hit the side delts? Yes, it will still hit the side delts, even if you're pressing at an angle up to 70 degrees. Obviously, the more vertical you are, the more optimal it is for side delt activation because you're pressing in the frontal plane. The more you lower that incline bench, the more upper chest gets recruited, which is why you're probably concerned about leaning back. But in your case, you're talking about the standing overhead press. See, the OHP is performed at a 100% vertical angle. And if you lean back just a little bit, now you may be down to 80 degrees. So you're still pressing at a steeper angle than a typical anterior delt press or high incline press. Therefore, you're still working the side delts hard. So even if you're arching a lot and pressing to a similar angle to an anterior delt press, by default, you're still training the side delts. You're also lifting heavier, which provides an overloading effect. If you're pressing your body weight for reps, Unless it's a push press, you're going to build 3D delts. And it's totally normal to lean back to coordinate around your face during the press. Most lifters lean back slightly to begin the press, then lean forward to help with the lockout. That is perfectly acceptable technique. So yes, if you want maximum side delt emphasis from vertical presses, staying perfectly upright is ideal, but that usually means using something like behind the neck presses or deficit handstand push-ups. What are your thoughts on the decline push-up to build the upper chest? I actually tend to prefer it over an incline barbell press, and I find it surprising that most lifters don't consider this exercise. It just shows that they skipped harder push-up variations early on. In most cases, the decline push-up ends up being a deficit press of some kind. You get more arm bend than a regular incline press, even though that already has a good range of motion. You can coordinate your body in a way that reduces sticking points, and because your body acts as a lever, the movement becomes slightly more length and bias. You can also lean forward like a pike push-up to get a bit more shoulder flexion in, so it's highly grindable and you have more freedom of movement. Your body essentially functions as the landmine. You're getting a great stretch and hitting the same exact angle as an incline bench press, just flipped upside down. If you literally rotate the screen, you'll see it's a similar movement, just less restrictive. Likewise, an incline push-up is basically a decline bench press. I know the terminology can be confusing since the angles are reversed. Now, what I love most is that you don't have to coordinate a barbell around your face, which is always a bit awkward and can lead to lockout problems due to bad moment arms. That's why I prefer using a Smith machine for incline bench or dumbbells, because with a straight bar, you're also trying to avoid hitting the rack, and even unracking can be a hassle. Like if you set it correctly and then you start doing the exercise, it can be annoying when you're trying to press back, which is what you're supposed to do because now you hit the rack. So there's more of a sticking point at the top, even though you're capable of doing more. Whereas decline push-ups don't suffer from these leverage problems, and they're very easy to adjust for the perfect incline. Plus, you don't need an adjustable bench. And what's great is that the movement is hard enough that you don't need much weight. I don't think I've ever gone heavier than 100 pounds on this exercise. I'll do a bodyweight set, then 50 pounds, then 100 in the backpack. And that's more than enough. And I do this with rings, by the way. I also prefer using a close grip, which has been a staple of mine for years and increases shoulder flexion. Honestly, it probably gave me more upper chest gains than incline pressing did, at least back in the day. That was my main upper chest exercise alongside OHB before I even had an adjustable bench, which I only got in 2022. That's not that long ago. Any ideas to reduce wrist pain during weighted dips on thin bars? I used to have this problem back in the day when I trained in commercial gyms. I had forearm splints in some of my older workout videos. I'd sometimes get overuse from weighted dips, mainly because the bars were those really thin, old school handles. In that case, I'd say maybe avoid going too heavy and favor higher reps or more controlled technique, because the absolute weight on your wrist can be problematic. Sure, you can adapt over time, just microload your way up, but I wouldn't be doing 1-rep maxes or very low rep sets if the bars are that bad. Try staying in the 6 to 10 or even higher rep range instead. Now, full disclaimer, that does make me a hypocrite, because what I used to do, since I didn't care, was wrap my wrists up tight. I'd cast them and do my workouts anyway. I worked up to 5 plates like that before it became too painful and too unstable. So I would wrap up if you're stubborn and keep wanting to do weighted dips. Now, another hack some guys recommend is to attach fat grips to the dip handles. I don't know how practical that is. I've never tried it. So they might roll around and it could be dangerous or unstable, and you definitely don't want that. But if you can get them to fix securely so they don't move at all, it might work. Otherwise, if everything is too uncomfortable, stop doing parallel bar dips altogether and maybe switch to ring dips. The ring handles are usually about 2 inches thick, so wrist pain will never be a problem. But now you have a much harder exercise to deal with, where you probably won't even have to load it to begin with. That also reduces absolute wrist strain, and you'll end up learning the false grip as well, which further helps with long-term bulletproofing. Chest to wall versus back to wall handstand push-ups. I always find the wording on this exercise interesting, because is it chest to wall when you're standing in front of the wall or when you're doing the exercise? From my perspective, I prefer having my chest face the wall during the push-up, which means my back is to the wall when I kick up into position. I find this setup significantly easier to get into. When you do it the other way, you have to fall onto the wall, and that never felt natural to me. See, in a freestanding handstand push-up, your balance point is centered. And when your legs lean too far forward and past that midpoint, that's usually when you fall. So with your back to the wall, you're simulating that same falling pattern, and something in my brain doesn't like that. It resists it every time. But falling backwards, I know I'll land safely on my feet if I'm doing the freestanding version. And so with the chest to wall version, my feet just drag up and down the wall and the coordination feels simple. It's like a Smith machine. My feet follow a fixed track, gliding up, staying slightly behind me. Now, if they drift forward a bit, you could argue that introduces some tipping, but I've never found it to be a problem, and it's very easy to just put them back on the wall. The biggest benefit is how easy it is to get into starting position and how adjustable the form is. You can turn it into an anterior delt press or stay perfectly vertical. You can move closer or further from the wall depending on your goal and strength. So there's much more variety to match your structure, and most non-calisthenics bros who struggle with balance can do the style without worrying about technique. That's why I recommend it. I always stress that I'm only doing this exercise for pure pressing strength. Ironically, this is often how beginners are taught to do a normal handstand push-up. But the full flip over into the wall never made sense to me. The angle feels off. You're pressing into a position that doesn't match how we normally push. When I think of push-ups, I think of toes behind me, like in a deficit pike push-up or a steep decline push-up. You're not dragging through the front of the foot. So when I try the traditional wall-facing style, something about it just doesn't click. I can't do it, and I've tried for years. And I know a lot of lifters feel the exact same way. That's why I recommend a plyo box, dipping forward, kipping the legs up, and using the wall like a steep bench. You won't have forward balance issues, and when you're done, just lower yourself, bring your knees to your chest, and you're out. It's simple, I've never had any close calls, and this is coming from someone who struggles with regular handstands. If I can do it, you can too. But I can't promise the same for the traditional version. You mentioned 300 pounds of total weight in pull-ups builds a big back. How much for behind the neck pull-ups? Also, I get more forearm pump than back pump. How to fix it? Behind the neck pull-ups are a lot more difficult than standard pull-ups. And if you look at my numbers, that's clear. Around 300 pounds total is my 1 rep max. I haven't even hit that for 5 reps, which shows how much harder it is. For context, my best weighted pull-up total on my strongest grip is 375. That's nearly a 2-plate difference between my strongest and weakest grip, which is exactly what you would expect. So for most lifters, anywhere in the 225 to 250 total weight zone on behind neck pull-ups is respectable. So if you're heavier and bulked up, doing bodyweight alone can already do wonders for your back. The same holds true for super wide grip pull-ups. Those are usually 1 to 1.5 plates below your best grip. Behind the neck just adds another layer of difficulty, so the standard should reflect that. So I can finally hit 2 plates for reps on regular super wides, but not behind the neck. It feels sloppy. So my total weight standard is lower by necessity. As for getting more of a forearm pump compared to back, are you using the fat side of your pull-up bar like I typically demonstrate? If so, make sure your thumb is over the bar, not under. This should lock you in and minimize the fat grip itself. And if your forearms are still taking over, it might just be a training age thing. That tends to resolve itself over time with consistent pull-up specialization. In the meantime, I recommend sticking to lower reps. Think about it, with high rep pull-ups, your arms are holding the bar, bending with each rep, and coordinating around your body. That creates a lot of time and attention for the forearms. And if you're doing 10 plus reps with added weight, you're easily hanging for over a minute, so your forearms will naturally fatigue. Honestly, I credit my big forearms to pull-up specialization. It fixed my old grip weakness. So I believe it's more about time and attention than a flaw in technique. A neutral grip can also be easier on the hands and wrists, but with behind the neck, that's usually not an option, unless your setup allows for it. You can also build more isometric strength through heavy dead hangs and timed holds to improve grip endurance. Otherwise, just stick to low rep ranges. 5 to 8 reps tops, and this issue should go away. I'm assuming you're doing bodyweight behind the neck pull-ups for reps. And if you're knocking out sets of 12 to 15, it's possible you'll feel your forearms, but you should still feel your back more. If not, your grip is probably too narrow. Hey, Alex used to recommend 30 bodyweight pull-ups. I'm trying to get to 30 on all styles, including fat bar. How realistic is this? I'm 5'6" with shorter arms. I'm going to be a bit pedantic here, but I'd say it's unrealistic for most lifters let alone calisthenics athletes, because some pull-up variations are simply too difficult to reach 30 reps on. That technically means body weight is more than enough resistance for life. So anyone who says, oh, pull-ups are too easy, they clearly haven't milked the other variations. So it's just less efficient to do all these reps for hypertrophy and getting plus ones. Take L-sit pull-ups. Are you gonna get 30 reps on a fat grip? Good luck. I usually tap out around 20 reps as a burnout finisher, and that's already quite difficult. Same story for super wide grip pull-ups, behind the neck or chest to bar. Even getting 15 to 20 reps is a serious challenge. Now I do think 20 is possible, but 30 on super wide? I can't do it. And I can hit about 35 regular bodyweight pull-ups. And you think I'd be able to do more since I could do 95 pounds for 15 reps. But once I get past 20, the burn and endurance starts to add up. So when we talk about 30 bodyweight pull-ups, we're usually referring to clean, full range of motion sets with a strong grip. Maybe chin-ups or medium pull-ups. But for more out of less weight variations like behind the neck, super wide, L-sit, chest to bar, archer pull-ups, fat grip, even one arm, it's a whole different game. And I have to point out that if shorter calisthenics specialists struggle with these, then most non-specialists will be humbled. The only exception might be if you're very light and completely detrained your legs and became an endurance specialist. But at that point, you're chasing high rep numbers for the sake of it. I believe strength should be a byproduct of well-rounded training. You should just get strong across all your variations, and just one day you come in, test your high rep set, and surprise yourself. Treat it as a test, not a builder. Not all pull-ups are the same, and that's why whenever I use the word pull-up, I'm always specific about which variation I'm referring to. The real goal is improving across all of them over time, but they won't all be equally strong or allow for high rep sets. Last question. Do you think doing biceps on a push day and triceps on a pull day to be more fresh will affect the next day's compound lifts? I'm torso dominant, thanks from France. If you're torso dominant and use variations that minimize the arms, like a wide grip bench press on your push day, then throwing in biceps on that day is probably fine. And you might be able to hit your triceps the next day without problems. But if you do something like a close grip bench with chains, followed by a JM press the next day, you're probably not going to be recovered. So I think your compound lift selection plays a bigger role in managing overlap than most people realize. And sometimes, even with overlap, the next day compounds aren't badly affected. In fact, I believe that's how Basement Bodybuilding trained to get his 18-inch arms. He ran a push-pull legs, push-pull program with the arm isolations flipped. So biceps on a push day and triceps on a pull day, and it didn't seem to affect his progress at all. He didn't notice any big performance drop-offs on compounds or isolations. You also see lifters who train chest and back on one day, followed by shoulders and arms and necks. GVS trains like this, and keep in mind you have higher motor unit recruitment, and while you'd expect overlap to be a problem, I think this mostly applies to the bigger muscles, being the chest, back, and legs. Not necessarily the arms unless you're really training them hard with specific compounds. So the only time you want to increase overlap is if you're running a low frequency program like a bro split. In that case, you plug extra volume in to still get close to twice a week frequency. But if you're running something like a push-pull legs with higher frequency, then you need to be more careful. Personally, I start my back workouts with biceps as pre-exhaust because that's the one area that's holding back my physique. And even after doing heavy barbell curls and preacher curls, I can still go quite heavy on weighted pull-ups and seal rows. Sure, I'm a bit weaker, but most people wouldn't even know I'm training in a pre-exhausted state. And if you do an upper body workout where you hit biceps first, then chest, then back, you'll barely notice a performance drop-off by the time you get to the pulling. It's in the same workout, but your biceps get a long rest window during the chest work. So even if they're pumped and sore early on, and you really feel them, they recover enough for you to finish strong when it comes to the back compounds. So if that's possible in the same workout, imagine how much more recovery you'd get if you're spacing those lifts across 2 days. So the best advice I can give you is to try it and see how you feel. Or you could do push, legs, pull if you just can't recover no matter what. If you're as torso dominant as you say, it might work great. And in that case, I'd even recommend opening your workouts with isolations. Since again, motor unit recruitment will be highest early on, and it'll feel like you're giving your lagging arms a focused arm day. That's exactly what I'm doing right now. And that's it for this Q&A video. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Make sure to like the top questions so I know what you want, and I'll go hard in full detail. See you guys next time.